We're all looking for ways to reduce stress and to relax. And many people turn to drugs or alcohol. And of course, healthier choices would be things like exercise, maybe massage, taking a warm bath, maybe putting a little lavender in it, maybe going to the spa and meditating. And of course, there are many forms of meditation. Now, one type of meditation is mindful meditation. It's effective in helping to promote relaxation by being present and not trying to change what's going on, being present with it. Now, if we're experiencing stress, how does this work?
Well, the idea is to try and be aware of what your problem is without being judgmental about it. So you notice that you have a problem, you try to detach the best you can from it, and just be present with it. And if it's something that's a serious problem, like a death of a spouse or someone in the family, of course you're not going to be able to resolve that problem quickly. But think of it this way. Over time, say a year later, isn't it going to be a lot different the way you approach it than you do during the acute episode? The idea of meditation in that setting is to help you find peace in a faster, so that you don't have to struggle with it so much along the way, because we know that stress and anxiety don't help the situation. So it's about letting go.
So, what did Buddha teach about suffering?
Well, that we should be present with our lives and be present with our problems. And what we tend to do is try to escape from that. And it's just the reverse of what we need to do.
Because that would take more energy and effort to escape from it.
Exactly. There's a huge difference between coping with something and resolving something. If you have a problem you're trying to cope with, that takes energy to continue to revolve it in your mind, to deal with it in some way that never really works, as opposed to resolving something where you come to a place where there's peace. It's over. You know what happened, you accept it.
This could even happen with pleasure. Because, many times people are happy and then they start worrying that maybe it's not going to last,
Well, if we become very hedonistic, very narcissistic, and just connected in our own pleasure, that's not going to do us much good either. I think we need to be balanced in how we approach our existence. When you love somebody, it's about wanting to make them happy. It's not so much about trying to worry about how we feel and holding on to the pleasure of a particular experience.
So, in other words, we need to show up for our lives.
That's exactly right. Is to be present with our lives as it is without having to change it.
And then we could end up missing our lives by wishing that it was different.
Well, you can think of another example. Let's say a woman gets breast cancer, okay? And all of a sudden there's this shock. I've got breast cancer. There's going to be a certain amount of depression and anxiety, and eventually there's going to be anger and disappointment. Those are all natural feelings, and we're not trying to escape the feelings.
And fear going into the future.
A lot of fear.
Yeah.
A lot of fear. But if we can get into this mindfulness meditation state and be present with it and detach with it the best we can, it's not so easy at the beginning. But again, look at it a year later. And a lot of the time with my patients who have breast or other forms of cancer, a year later, I ask them a question. What did you learn? What were the positive things from your cancer? And there were a lot of them.
Especially about relationships.
Absolutely. And valuing things and putting them in the right perspective. It's not so much about your stock portfolio or how much real estate you own. It's about relationships and making those right. So these are, in some ways, gifts that come at a very expensive price. And while I don't think it's great to have breast or any other kind of cancer, usually when that happens, mindfulness meditation is one good way to begin to start that process of acceptance.
It's interesting because there are different types of meditation, and some types of meditation do just the opposite.
Well, they have a different value.
Yeah, so like maybe with imagery and visualizations and with guided meditations.
Yes.
They take you someplace in your mind that's someplace different than being present with where you are.
Yes, and there's value to that too, and yet at the same time, it's escaping from what's happening at the moment. Just the reverse of what the Buddha said. Not that he's necessary, or that person that's not the only approach. Heart bath would be another example, where you're thinking about a time in your life when you were
feeling peace, maybe.
Really happy and peace, joyful. All of a sudden, when you shift that frame of maybe being depressed because you have breast cancer to thinking about that wonderful time when you're being loved, your biochemistry and physiology change. And when they change, then you change in the way you feel. It's a remarkable thing.
Or like when you're angry with somebody, if you can try to put yourself in a state of love, like thinking of something in your life that made you feel
Sure.
loving.
Sure.
And it will also to help you to be forgiving.
Yeah, well, those are great ideas and they work, and it's good for the immediate moment. And yet there's this whole business of trying to accept and resolve those issues that we have in our life that are very difficult.
Well, I guess, whatever works for the individual.
Yeah, so
For-
what you need is an approach that makes the most sense to you depending on what your situation is. And it might be any of those forms of meditation depending on what your goal is. But for the short-term solution, or to speed it up and to go forward maybe a few months later from when a disaster happens, if you could be present with a situation and meditate on that and detach and be observing what happens, this form of mindfulness meditation can be a very powerful and useful tool.